Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So going back to this question of Pearl Harbor and this fantastic distortion that Franklin D. Roosevelt provoked Japan, the debate in Japan for years had been, we're going to strike somewhere. Should we strike north against the Soviets, get oil from Siberia? Should we strike south against the Anglo-Americans, clear them out of the way, and get to the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia, where oil is available? Notice that people like Stinnett never provide any internal Japanese documentation. They never show you anybody in Japan saying, what? They moved the fleet to Pearl Harbor? That's absolutely outrageous. We're going to protest that. This means war. There's nothing like this. It's not even attempted. It's just assumed that these are, again, provocations. Japan at that time, not today, this is, of course, a different world, and we have to stress that. But Japan today is a completely different and reformed place. But it was a brutal fascist aggressor that didn't need to be provoked. It did it all on its own. As a matter of fact, if Japan needed provocations, they would provoke themselves. Interesting thing that Stinnett never paid any attention to. The Japanese provoked themselves when they wanted to invade Manchuria, set up their puppet state of Manchukuo. They provoked it with the Mukden incident of September 1931, which was to plant some dynamite along a railroad line, blow it up, and then, using this as a pretext to bring into operation two very large artillery pieces, 9.2-inch guns, which they had hidden in the so-called swimming pool of a Japanese building. They began firing at a Chinese barracks. The Japanese were there in the first place because of the 1905 war, when they had attacked the Russian fleet and destroyed it in the port of Darien, Port Arthur. So the Mukden incident, September 1931, Japanese provoked themselves and attack, take over Manchuria, and then when they want to go beyond that, in 1937, in July, they provoked the shooting incident at the Marco Polo Bridge, which is essentially the line of demarcation. It's a railroad choke point between Manchuria on the one side and then the body of China under Chiang Kai-shek and the Chinese nationalists on the other. So two cases where the Japanese provoked themselves. They didn't need to wait for Roosevelt. So the problems with this view, I think, are quite evident. Notice also, there's absolutely no proof, never shown, that Roosevelt says to any naval officer or anybody else, don't send intelligence to Pearl Harbor. As Harry Elmer Barnes put it, and this guy became a Roosevelt hater when he went off the deep end later in his life, before he died in 1972, he confessed, I've never found a scrap of evidence that showed that Roosevelt knew exactly when and where the attack took place. And indeed, then, as I would add, there's no indication that he ever told anybody, don't send the intelligence to the commanders. Rather, we have the question of Kimmel and Short. Now, there had been a war warning, November 27, 1941. What part of war warning did they not understand? It also said in the Army message, it said, carry out reconnaissance. In the case of Kimmel, it said, carry out an appropriate defensive deployment. What would this have looked like? You have a lot of destroyers. You have light cruisers with scout planes on them. They can search hundreds and hundreds of miles of ocean. You have a lot of submarines. You have PBY Catalinas. You have B-18 Bolo light to medium bombers. You've got radar. Why not mobilize all these things? An energetic, resourceful, innovative, aggressive commander would have gone to visit the radar. He would have said, I want a phone line to this radar station. I want a liaison officer. I want ground observers. There used to be the Ground Observer Corps. Let's put people with binoculars all along the coast of Hawaii, and if they see planes coming in, we have phone lines set up. We can gain 30 to 40 or 50 minutes of early warning. That's enough time to launch the planes and so forth. Plus, how did the Japanese find out? When Doolittle's raiders were approaching Japan a few months later, How did the Japanese get the early warning the Doolittle was coming? Through a fishing boat. If your superior officers didn't let you do all these things, which is not the case, he never tried. You could basically do an operation of your own, send out a bunch of fishing boats with radios, and through them you can find out what's coming. Admiral Block, the commander of the naval district that would always be there, had 20 to 25 ships of his own. So he just didn't do these things. And of course, the ammunition was not distributed to the guns on the ships. The fighter cover was not there. There was no combat air patrol. There was nothing. And this is now several days, weeks after receiving the war warning. Now, if we look in this, we're also told that the people in Washington had declared that the North Pacific was an empty sea. Well, the person who says that it's an empty, a vacant ocean is this Admiral Richmond K. Turner, whom a number of authors have identified as the one who did block the intelligence going to Kimmel and Short. In particular, on December 3rd, there's a proposal to send a supplementary war warning saying, watch out, don't become the new victim of a new Port Arthur surprise attack by the Japanese. And it's Admiral Richmond K. Turner who says, no, don't send it. It's going to confuse them. This is no good. It's also interesting from the point of view of Kimmel that the big enemy of Kimmel is Admiral Richmond K. Turner. For example, here in the Costello book, let's see, Costello's well-known Days of Infamy, he tells you this case of Admiral Richmond K. Turner on board one of the U.S. battleships in Tokyo Bay, right at the night before the end of the war, the night before MacArthur signs the armistice and the surrender. Admiral Richmond K. Turner comes into to the wardroom on the ship with a bunch of admirals and captains, and he says that Kimmel, he had all the information and he didn't do anything about it. They should hang him higher than a kite. Well, this is where we have to let Kimmel off the hook, because he was not given intelligence warnings and other material, and this was withheld not by Roosevelt, but by Admiral Richmond K. Turner. And Admiral Richmond K. Turner, after the war, in order to maintain his own reputation, became the main persecutor of Kimmel. So, where does this leave us? The other question is the cryptanalysis. The story is there's magic. These are code intercepts. The U.S. can read purple, the Japanese diplomatic code. The British can read JN-25, the fleet code. There's an implied division of labor. The U.S. does share the purple with the British. The British, under the orders of Sir Winston Churchill, do not share the JN-25 with the U.S. As Costello points out, Sir Winston Churchill's war diary is completely blank for the first week of December. And in terms of the irony, Stinnett claims that Roosevelt prevented the admirals from getting intelligence. So Roosevelt withholds intelligence from the Navy. In reality, it's the Navy who withhold intelligence from Roosevelt. Reality stood on its head in reverse. The reality is, and this is it's basically written up in the Rusbridger and Nave study, which I think is the most authoritative. Rusbridger and Nave, betrayal at Pearl Harbor, how Churchill lured Roosevelt into World War II. We find that the magic intel, the purple intelligence that the U.S. could read, was denied to Roosevelt between September 1940 and January 23rd, 1941. So for 4 months. And then it denied again between May 1941 and the 12th of November 1941. Did you know that movie, Tora, 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 with E.G. Marshall as Colonel Rufus Bratton? You'll see it there. The president's name is stricken from the list of the people who get the intel, and also the non-secret government people like Cordell Hull and Sumner Wells are denied the intel. Who does all this stuff? It's Colonel Simpson of the Invisible Government, General Marshall, Wall Street's favorite general, and Admiral Richmond K. Turner, who is the guy who literally prevents the intelligence and the appropriate warnings from being sent to Pearl Harbor. So take a look at these books. Costello, The Days of Infamy, and the West Bridger Knave, Betrayal at Pearl Harbor, and put away this silly book by Stinnen, which I think is increasingly discredited.